I never expected to be invited to the desert again, let alone by him. When I first met Sheikh Amir bin Khalid al-Mansour, I was just an exhausted graduate student researching tribal irrigation systems. He was a patron of the local university, sharp-eyed and soft-voiced, a man who moved like someone who owned every room he stepped into but never needed to prove it. We'd shared polite conversations during academic functions, nothing more than that, until one day, out of nowhere, he offered to show me the valley in his ancestral homeland, the place my thesis was centered on. "If you want to understand the land, come feel it," he'd said, smiling slightly. "Not everything lives in books, Daniel." Now 2 years later, that same man had texted me, "Come to Al Ramla again. Let's talk." No explanation. No context. Just that. I said yes before I could stop myself. It had taken me 27 hours to get here, 3 flights and a 6-hour drive past ridges of wind-carved stone and stretches of golden nothing. The sun was a molten coin dipping into the horizon as I arrived at the edge of the camp. 4 large tents clustered around a flickering fire, the scent of cardamom and ash curling in the air. The desert hummed around us like it was holding its breath. I hadn't seen him yet. Only his staff greeted me, respectful, tight-lipped, and evasive when I asked where he was. That night, after a quiet meal of lamb and rice, I stepped out into the cooling air and found him standing barefoot on a rise of sand, wearing white linen and staring at the stars like he was waiting for them to answer something. He didn't turn when I approached. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I wasn't sure I'd be invited," I replied, heart jumping the way it always did around him. He glanced at me then, his eyes catching the firelight from camp, amber and unreadable. I just wanted to talk. But something in his voice sounded heavier than that. Softer. A thread of something unspoken laced beneath those words. We stood in silence for a while. I watched the muscles in his jaw work, how his thumb absently traced the edge of the silver ring on his left hand. The air between us crackled in that familiar, frustrating way it always had. I'd grown used to that tension, like we were dancing on a cliff's edge and neither of us wanted to look down. Except this time I thought maybe one of us finally would. And for reasons I didn't yet understand, the thought terrified me. And thrilled me. We met on a balcony in Sharjah, of all places. It was at a university-sponsored gala, one of those unbearably formal nights where everyone was busy pretending not to network. I had stepped out for air, tie loosened, nerves buzzing from a presentation I'd barely survived. That's when he found me, holding a glass of warm soda and staring at the skyline like it held the answers to climate resilience modeling. "You looked like you were either about to faint or leap," he said casually, leaning against the rail beside me. I remember blinking at him, recognizing his face from the oversized event banners. Sheikh Amir. I didn't know billionaires haunted balconies. He smiled, just a flicker at the corner of his mouth. Only the dramatic ones. We talked for half an hour that night. Nothing extraordinary. Just a mutual interest in land restoration and a shared dislike for overly sweet mocktails. But something shifted. After that, he found reasons to invite me to panels, to dinners, to those strange in-between spaces where academia brushed shoulders with old-world royalty. And somewhere along the way he stopped feeling like a sponsor and started feeling like someone I missed when he wasn't around. Our conversations had a rhythm, half sarcasm, half sincerity. We could argue over ecological ethics for an hour and then laugh about how terrible I looked in linen. There was a kind of ease with him even when I didn't understand the full shape of who he was. He gave just enough to keep me leaning in like a book with too many bookmarked pages and no clear ending. Now, in this desert camp, I watched him spoon hot tea into 2 small cups from the traditional dala, graceful even in silence. "Still take it with too much sugar?" he asked without looking. "I like to pretend I'm sweet on the inside," I replied, accepting the cup. "You still take it like it's a test of endurance?" He gave me a dry look. "It builds character." "Is that what you tell your taste buds?" We both chuckled and something inside me warmed. Not from the tea. Later that evening, a gust of wind knocked over one of the tent flaps, sending a ripple through the entire setup. I followed the staff as they rushed to secure it. By the time I returned to my tent, my bag was missing. More accurately, it had been placed inside his tent. "The zipper broke on yours," one of the attendants explained apologetically, "and the other spare is being used. Sheikh Amir said to put your things in his, just for tonight." I hesitated at the threshold. His tent was twice the size of mine, filled with woven carpets, brass lanterns and the scent of cedarwood. At the center, a single large mattress, wide enough for 2 but still intimate in a way that made my chest tighten. When he entered moments later, a slight smirk playing on his lips, I tried not to read too much into it. "I'll take the left side," he said easily, unlacing his boots. I nodded, suddenly too aware of everything. The brush of his robe as he moved past, the way his fingers paused near the edge of the blanket, the silence that stretched like a held breath. As we settled in for the night, I kept my back to him, staring at the fabric ceiling. I could hear him breathing. Not heavily, just rhythmically. Steady. Present. You ever think about that night in Sharjah? He asked quietly. My heart gave a sudden, panicked lurch. What about it? You looked so lost. And so sure at the same time. I smiled into the pillow. You make me sound poetic. I was curious, he murmured, voice lower now. Still am. I didn't know how to answer that. My throat felt too tight. In the dark, I could feel the space between us. Not touching, not quite, but charged. Like gravity was tilting, slowly pulling me toward something I'd spent too long pretending I couldn't feel. And I couldn't help but wonder, if I turned toward him right now, would he already be facing me? The desert had its own way of deciding things. That night, a storm blew in, not dramatic at first, just a few restless gusts that lifted sand into the air like whispers. But by midnight, the wind howled against the canvas walls with the force of a freight train. Poles creaked, ropes groaned. The air turned sharp and cold, thick with grainy static. I sat up in bed as the temperature dropped, pulling the blanket tighter around me. Across the mattress, Amir stirred, then turned toward me. His eyes glinted in the low lantern light. Sandstorm, he muttered, his voice husky with sleep. Worse than forecasted. Outside, I heard shouting, 2 attendants scrambling to reinforce the tent stakes. But the wind was unforgiving. A sharp crack echoed through the camp. Then a sudden flurry of sand forced its way through a flap seam, scattering grit across the floor like confetti. Amir stood, barefoot and shirtless, moving toward the flap in nothing but loose cotton pants. I looked away too quickly, heat blooming in my face despite the cold. You're not seriously going out there? I need to check the others. Stay here. He threw on a robe and vanished into the storm like it answered only to him. 10 minutes passed. Maybe more. The lantern flickered. I counted the thrum of the wind against the walls to distract myself from the worry. Then he returned, dusted in pale sand and hair windswept, eyes darker than before. Tent 3 collapsed, he said, pulling the flap shut tight behind him. I had them move the crew into the supply tent, but it's going to get crowded. He looked at me, then down at the mattress. We'll need to stay put. Ours is the most stable, but, he paused, his voice going soft. We'll have to share for warmth. I laughed a bit too quickly. Just like a survival manual. He didn't smile. Just walked to the other side of the bed and sat. I could feel the distance shrinking with every breath. I tried to act normal. Whatever that meant. We lay down again, this time under the same blanket. God, he was warm. The silence stretched. My mind screamed at me to say something, anything, but all I could focus on was the sensation of his arm brushing mine. Bare skin. A few hairs against my forearm. A casual, accidental intimacy that made it hard to breathe. I turned slightly toward him. You've done this before, haven't you? What? Storms. This place. All of it. Yes, he said, and then after a beat, but not like this. He didn't elaborate. Just shifted, and suddenly his shoulder grazed mine again. Firmer this time, not quite pulling away. His fingers were so close to mine I could feel the heat of them even in the cold. I stared at the ceiling. Every sound outside faded. My whole world narrowed to the space between us. This shouldn't mean anything. But it did. He moved his hand just slightly, until the backs of his fingers brushed my knuckles. I'm not sure what I'm doing, I said before I could stop myself. The words came out small. Honest. He didn't answer right away. Just let the moment breathe. Neither am I, he finally replied, voice low. But that hasn't stopped me before. I turned to look at him and he met my gaze. There it was again, that thing I kept catching in his eyes when he thought I wasn't looking. That softness. That want. You're not just curious anymore, I whispered. He exhaled through his nose. No. The air between us pulsed. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. This was the moment, wasn't it? The one where everything shifted. Where all the things we never said were suddenly louder than words. But I couldn't move. Couldn't risk what might break if I reached out and he pulled away. He noticed. Of course he did. I won't push you, he said, voice gentle. If you need space. I don't know what I need, I cut in. I just know it's hard, when you're this close. That got a small smile out of him. Not smug. Just knowing. I know. His fingers found mine again. This time they stayed. Not holding, just touching. Steady. Present. I closed my eyes. Let the silence stretch. Let myself feel how natural it was. His presence beside me, the quiet tension that had always been there now finally acknowledged. And beneath the chaos of the storm, something calmer stirred inside me. Something frightening, yes, but also unmistakably real. The storm howled louder outside, but in here, in this strange little tent in the middle of nowhere, it felt like the safest place in the world. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But I knew this. I didn't want to go back to the version of myself that pretended this wasn't happening. Not anymore. The wind died sometime before dawn, leaving an unnatural stillness in its wake. The air was heavy with the scent of cooled sand and damp canvas, the kind of silence that felt sacred, like even the desert was catching its breath. I hadn't slept. Not really. I lay on my back, our hands still barely touching under the shared blanket. At some point during the night, our arms had aligned, shoulder to wrist, and now the warmth of his skin was a steady distraction, impossible to ignore. His breathing had long since evened out, the kind of sleep that only came to people who had learned to live with unrest. He looked peaceful. Maybe for the first time since I'd known him. And yet, inside me, a war was raging. I tried to be reasonable. To file the moment away under the category of circumstantial closeness and temporary vulnerability. But no matter how many ways I tried to rationalize it, my feelings were louder. They pressed against my ribs, insistent and aching, demanding to be acknowledged. I turned my head slowly, just enough to watch him. His jaw was relaxed now, lips slightly parted. There was something heartbreakingly human about him in sleep. No titles, no carefully measured words, just Amir. The man who made fun of my terrible taste in music and remembered how I took my coffee. The man who looked at the stars like they owed him answers, but laughed like he knew the punchline to some joke no one else could hear. The man I was inconveniently and irreversibly falling for. And I couldn't keep pretending I wasn't. I whispered his name, barely above the sound of my own pulse. Amir. He stirred, brow furrowing. Then slowly his eyes opened. Still heavy with sleep but focused. On me. Mem? His voice was low, rough. I can't, I hesitated. I can't keep pretending this is normal. Pause. He blinked at me, then pushed himself up slightly on one elbow, blanket slipping down to his waist. What do you mean? My throat tightened, heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. This. Whatever this has become. I sat up too, drawing my knees to my chest. You keep pulling me in, and I keep letting you. And maybe that's on me, maybe I should have said something earlier, but I didn't. And now we're here and God, I don't know how to breathe around you anymore. He was silent. The kind of silence that demands to be respected. I think about you more than I should, I continued, my voice cracking. Not just as a colleague or a friend or some complicated patron of my research. I think about you when I'm alone, when I wake up, when I'm writing. It's not subtle. It's not passing. His gaze hadn't left me once. I swallowed hard. You said you were curious that night in Sharjah. And I think I tried to convince myself that was all it was. Curiosity. Because if it was more, then I'd have to admit what I've been feeling this whole damn time. And I wasn't ready. A beat passed. And now, he asked quietly. I looked at him, really looked. At the man who made me feel more alive and more afraid than I had in years. Now I'm terrified, I admitted. But I'm also done pretending. His eyes darkened, not with anger but something deeper. His expression was unreadable for a moment, and that silence returned, coiled like a held breath. Then he shifted closer. I didn't know if you felt it too, he said, voice almost reverent. I hoped. God, Daniel, I hoped. But I didn't want to push you. I laughed, nervous and shaking. You didn't have to. You were already inside my head. He reached up slowly, brushing his fingers against my wrist. The touch was feather-light, hesitant. I've spent so long being careful, he murmured. Every glance, every word. I've built an entire world on restraint. But with you he exhaled sharply. It's different. It's always been different. I tilted my head toward him, searching his face for anything uncertain. I found none. So what now? I asked. He smiled, not wide but real. Now you stop pretending. And I stop holding back. His hand slid gently to the back of my neck, tentative, like he was still waiting for me to pull away. I didn't. I leaned in, closer, until our foreheads touched, breath mingling. My skin prickled from the nearness, my heart hammering in my chest. I've never done this before, I whispered. Not like this. Me neither, he said. Not with someone who mattered. We sat there, forehead to forehead, for a long moment. letting everything unspoken settle between us like dust after a storm. Then, without fanfare, without urgency, he kissed me. It was soft, exploratory, the kind of kiss that didn't demand anything but offered everything. His lips were warm, sure, but not forceful, like he was learning me through touch, taking his time with every moment. I leaned into him, fingers curling into the fabric at his waist, anchoring myself in the one thing that suddenly felt solid. When we pulled apart, neither of us moved far. Just close enough to look into each other's eyes and not flinch. "You've ruined every quiet moment I'll ever have from now on," I whispered, dazed. He laughed, brushing his thumb against my cheek. "Good. You ruined me the moment you started arguing about ancient aqueducts." We settled back into the mattress, this time facing each other, legs slightly tangled, arms instinctively drawing close. The blanket cocooned us, but the warmth came from something else now. Something brighter. "I'm still scared," I admitted, voice barely audible. "So am I," he replied. "But I'd rather be scared with you than silent without you." I let that sit with me, those words folding gently into the quiet between us. His hand rested lightly against my chest, right over my heartbeat. Matching rhythm. Steady now. And as I drifted toward sleep, I realized something that should have terrified me, but didn't. This wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning. I woke to sunlight filtering through the tent walls, soft, golden, the kind of light that made everything feel like a memory even as it was happening. For a few disoriented seconds, I didn't remember where I was. Then I shifted slightly and felt it. His arm still draped across my waist, his chest rising and falling against my back, warm and solid. His breath stirred the hair near my neck. And just like that, it all came rushing back. The storm. The confession. The kiss. The impossible, undeniable fact that Amir had kissed me and I had kissed him back. I lay there, eyes open, heart full in a way that felt almost unfamiliar, like I'd stumbled into a version of myself I'd been afraid to meet. He stirred behind me, his hold tightening for a second before loosening. "You're awake," he mumbled, voice rough with sleep. "You say that like it's a crime." "It is," he murmured into my shoulder. "We should stay like this. Just a few more hours." I smiled. "You realize this tent has zero sound insulation, right? If we oversleep, someone's going to assume you seduced the visiting academic and we'll both be scandalized." He laughed, low and genuine, pulling away just enough to look at me. "Isn't that exactly what happened?" My eyes narrowed playfully. "Excuse you." I confessed under extreme emotional duress. He smirked. "And I kissed you like a gentleman. I deserve an award." "You're impossible," I said, but I couldn't help the grin spreading across my face. His hand found mine beneath the blanket, our fingers sliding together like it was second nature. We lay there in easy silence, the shift between us subtle but seismic. There was no more pretending, no more masking every glance or second-guessing every word. It wasn't just that we had kissed. It was that, somehow, we were still here, unchanged and entirely different at the same time. "I keep thinking this is going to feel heavier," I said after a while. "Like there should be more fear in it." And instead, I met his gaze. "It feels like I exhaled after holding my breath for 2 years." He nodded, brushing a thumb across the back of my hand. "That's how I know it's real." There was something uncharacteristically open in his face, something raw and sincere beneath the usual composure. I wondered how many masks he wore in his daily life, and how rare it was for someone to see him without them. "We're not exactly simple," I said a little more seriously now. You. "I'm still figuring out what the hell to do with the rest of my career. We live on different continents. Different worlds, really." "I know," he said. "But that hasn't stopped me from wanting you." The words landed like a soft weight on my chest. Not possessive, not impulsive, just honest. "I want this too," I said. "You, us, whatever it looks like. Even if it's messy." He leaned in and kissed my temple, then the side of my jaw, as if tracing a path to calm the nerves behind my words. "It will be messy. But we'll figure it out." His lips lingered near my ear. "You've survived worse than falling for someone inconvenient." I chuckled, shifting so we were nose to nose. "You're assuming you're the inconvenient one." "Oh, I know I am," he said, grinning. "But so are you. It's part of your charm." I rolled my eyes and kissed him again because the alternative was blushing myself into another dimension. Later we sat outside the tent, watching the staff rebuild the damaged shelters and drinking tea that tasted faintly of ash. Our shoulders touched. Occasionally so did our fingers. No one stared. No one asked. The desert, in its infinite discretion, kept our secret, just for now. But we both knew we weren't going back to what we were before. And neither of us wanted to. The next evening, the storm just a memory, we stood atop a dune at the edge of the camp, watching the desert fade into dusk. The wind was gentle this time, cool and dry as it passed over our skin. A few meters behind us, voices murmured around the fire, the soft clinking of tea glasses mixing with the occasional burst of laughter. Life had resumed its rhythm. But something in me had shifted. Beside me, Amir stood barefoot in the sand, his robes fluttering slightly. His hand brushed mine every few seconds, as if he couldn't quite stop reminding himself I was still here. I didn't mind. He glanced sideways, that faint smile tugging at the edge of his mouth. You keep looking like you're waiting for the desert to whisper something to you. I smirked. I think I was hoping for answers. And? I looked out toward the horizon. The sand glowed with that impossible rose-gold hue, endless and vast. I got one, I said. But it wasn't the one I expected. He stepped closer, our shoulders brushing, the contact casual now but deeply familiar. Tell me. I hesitated, then turned to face him fully. That I don't have to figure it all out before I let myself be happy. His eyes met mine, softer now. It's allowed. Even for you. I gave him a playful look. Was that sarcasm or affection? Both, he said straight-faced. The most sincere kind of affection. I laughed, and he reached for my hand, this time without hesitation. His fingers laced through mine, slow and certain. There, in the shifting sand, that small gesture meant everything. We stood like that for a while, saying nothing. The silence felt different now. No longer full of fear or unspoken longing, but of quiet promise. Eventually he spoke again, voice lower. You'll be leaving soon. Tomorrow, I said. Back to the real world. Deadlines. Classes. Grant applications. And long-winded academic emails, I'm sure. Don't forget budget spreadsheets. My greatest enemy. He chuckled. So dramatic. But yes, the glamorous life of an environmental researcher. I sighed. I'll come back though. If the offer still stands. He didn't look away. It does. Always. There was something in the way he said it, uncomplicated, steady. Like he wasn't promising me the stars, just a place in his sky. And until then? I asked. He reached into his pocket and pulled something out, small, metallic. A silver ring almost identical to the one he wore. This belonged to my grandfather, he said, offering it to me. He gave it to me the first time I left home. Told me it was for grounding. For remembering where I came from. I looked at him, startled. Are you sure? I want you to have it. Not because I expect you to wear it forever or that it means something grand. Just a reminder. He pressed it into my palm, fingers curling around mine. That you're not wandering alone. My throat tightened. I looked down at the cool metal, then up at him again. I'll bring it back next time, I whispered. He smiled, eyes warm. That's the plan. We started walking back toward the camp, the sand whispering beneath our feet, our hands still joined. No big declarations. No promises of forever. Just the quiet certainty that something real had started here. That we'd stopped running from it. That maybe, just maybe, we were ready, step by step, storm by storm, to figure out what came next. Together. And for now that was more than enough.